This is Visions Under Construction, a chance for our guests to share their visions and tell us what they're working on. Before we begin this episode, we'd like to thank Simwood, who wants to turn developers into telcos. Simwood.com. Check out greenfield.tech and see your dreams feasible and affordable. Thanks to ZipDX and Bluehost for their support services, and to Voxbone for local rate dial-ins. All right, and I will probably, that was amusing. I will probably put up some numbers in case anybody actually is watching this live. Also, I invited a couple of people who may show up shortly. Kathleen King is one, and Magic Keith will also maybe be with us, or maybe he's watching. Meanwhile, I'm going to introduce everybody, starting from left to right. So it'll be Mr. Andy Smith, if he's actually really there. And he's waving. Cass Morrison, my old friend, who I've known for, 2011. Wow, almost 7 years, Cass. Crazy, huh? You were one of the very first people. You're muted, by the way. You can unmute now. You were one of the very first people on, as I was, on Google+. And here we are, still there, right?
Yeah, it's been great. Met some long-term friends, so that's kind of nice.
One of these days, I'm going to get over to your neck of the woods, and we can actually meet, I hope. Here's a guy that I have met, which is who is Mr. Michael Graves. We've met a couple of times.
Hello.
At conferences and stuff. Since it's just the four of us, we'll go around the board and say, first of all, when I talk about devices and how we live with the technology, I'm really talking about stuff that we call it smart devices, but I meant actually connected devices, because your microwave might be smart. Hey, Keith Milner is joining us. Great. Hello, Keith. Your microwave or your oven, we have a pretty smart refrigerator, pretty smart oven, pretty smart microwave, and so on. But none of them are connected to the internet, nor would I absolutely not want them to be. But let's see what Mr. Andy Smith has, first of all, that is connected to the internet. Do you have a smart TV? Obviously phones. How many phones in the house?
Oh, how many phones in the house? That's a good question. There are rather too many, I suspect. I mean, in terms of mobiles, there are, I don't know, there are 5 of us, and each one has a mobile, at least one. I have several, but then again, that's my job, so I would expect to have that. IP phones, I seem to have quite a few of those around as well, although these days only one actually connected. But in terms of smart devices, I've got an Amazon Echo, but that's as far as I go. I am against such things as smart TVs and so on. I'd rather augment things myself than get what the manufacturer wants you to have. So I much prefer buying dumb devices and then adding technology to them.
So no scale that tweets your weight every day.
No. Although that might be useful. It might be useful. You never know.
Or watches with heart rate. Now, Cass, I know you must have. I'm just kidding. You have a lot of devices. I know you do the fitness thing and all that. What do you have connected?
Well, we do have a scale that's connected to the internet, but I've turned off any kind of, I turn off all the parts where it says, do you want to tell everybody? My answer is no. Everything is private. We don't have anything, all of our appliances are old. We just put some automatic light switches and stuff in, but they're not internet connected. But we did, for Christmas, get an Alexa drip. We got a Dot and an Echo and 2 home minis. So
when you say you got,
we are connected.
You ordered them, or you got them as gifts for each other, or somebody else gifted you? How did they get into the house?
Oh, well, in our house, that means that I bought them and I pretended that I gave them to other people.
All right, and they keep going around to Keith. Keith is a professional in IT, so you probably have 7 million. We don't have to count every IP phone or every.
No, I mean, I've got loads. I mean, I've got about 4 or 5 smartphones on my desk here, because again, like Andy, it's my job, so I've got to have those. I've got a Siemens for normal phones. I've got DECT, and I've got a DECT system which has 5 or 6 handsets around the house, and I've had that probably for about 7 years. And that goes back to a base station, which is IP connected for SIP. So you can actually plug it into a normal line or a SIP line. So that's kind of cool. In terms of the kind of more modern smart devices, I've got a few, but most of mine are kind of, I would kind of say they're not directly connected. I'm not a big fan of directly connected, Wi-Fi connected light bulbs or anything like that. Because, well, for all kinds of reasons, but I do have some lights which are on a lighting controller, and they are controllable from a smartphone app and via the internet. And I found out recently that they work with a Google Home that I was given, and that's kind of cool. It's kind of useful occasionally. But most of those devices I have kind of go through some kind of gateway, so they're not kind of directly connected. Now, personally, I prefer that because it gives me a point of control. So,
okay, now that's normal. And Michael, maybe.
Okay, I'm on ZipDX, just to be different. And I wanted to check against my packet loss problem. This seems to be a little bit better. I will say to you this. I have too many of such devices. But it started a long, long time ago. It started back in 2000 when we purchased a TiVo DVR. It wasn't internet connected, but it had to be telephone connected in order to fetch scheduling information. And we've had such a fantastic experience with that as a product that we have had several generations of TiVo. And so they are now IP connected. And last year we got Amazon Echoes, and the newest thing are these little widgets, which are Wi-Fi connectable, Amazon controllable outlets, and they're dirt cheap, specifically for turning Christmas tree lights off and on and that sort of thing. We like our Amazon Echoes, but we very much would like the voice recognition stuff to be done on premises. We would like it to not, we think IP connectivity is okay, but we would like it to be locally resourced and not always talking to the mothership.
Makes sense. I will chime in with my inventory here. And Cass, I wanted to get into this too, because I know you're into it. So I used to use Google Fit, and I think you use a different app. And Andy's very fit conscious. I'm sure he uses millions of fitness apps, right? No. Anyway, I got rid of Fit because for a while I was like, I wanted to record my weight. I figured, well, you know what? I could probably, if I really want to record my weight every day, why don't I just open up, not Google Docs, not Google Docs. Anyway, the point is that my weight is stable, so I don't have to mess with the graphs anymore. And I got tired of it. This is the whole other subject of, so I have a Samsung watch, which is hard to show, but yeah, here it is. Samsung watch. And my watch, and this is where I start complaining about IoT and smart devices connected to the internet. So the watch, if by any chance, especially in the early software versions, when it disconnected for some reason, you had to reinstall the entire software suite. And Samsung, bless their hearts, I know you love Samsung, Cass, but I don't care for their software mostly. The watch is great. This is an older watch. It's not an expensive one, but I do like what they've done with it. But they do force health and other apps to be installed. It's very hard, and there are a lot of apps you cannot uninstall. Anyway, I don't want to rant a long time on that, but I am concerned about feeding databases. Not that I'm worried that my weight is out there in public. That's not my point. My point is, whatever they're doing with this, if they're not paying me for it, I'm not sure why I'm contributing it. And that goes for a lot of photos as well, by the way. Although this, well, yeah, if we take cell phone cameras, that would be my next question is, what kind of data are all of you feeding to the net? Let me just conclude my data thing with the fact that I have a Ring doorbell. And if anyone who knows me even slightly knows that I'm extremely irritated with the fact that they send your videos and record them up on their cloud. And my bad probably for not understanding that from the get-go. So I'm partially responsible for my distaste with that device, but I don't like that idea. Now, I wasn't looking for a burglar alarm type situation. Maybe some people are. Anyway, Andy, what data are you feeding to the Google, the Amazon, the Twitter, the Facebook, the Instagram, whatever?
Not a huge amount, to be honest. I mean, in my case, I don't post very much, and I don't blog. I don't really reply to people very much on the net. I always find that involves.
Am I the only one? No, everybody's making the.
No, I can't hear him.
Okay,
My wonderful little super mute button. Now I'm going to shake around all over for a second. There we go. Right, let's try again. How far did we get?
I would say about half.
About half. I've no idea what that means.
Well, you don't post much. You don't.
No, I don't. I don't post much. I don't blog much, and so I take some photographs. I think that's probably about it. The data that I put up, not a tremendous amount. Having said that, I mean, from a company perspective, we use Google Docs, so everything is on the net. So from a private life perspective, not a huge amount. From a work perspective, absolutely everything is up there.
Mm-hmm.
Although it's not, of course, accessible to most people.
Theoretically, there was a little snafu a couple of months ago on that, but I don't remember the details of it. It seems that some doc was shared. You know, the danger isn't so much that Google is going to mess things up, although they have. But in the cloud, the real danger is that some little thing just appears for a second, and somebody else is there at the right time, and until it goes around. Anyway, Cass, your fitness, your daily, your golf, what else? Anything? What are you feeding the net?
Fitbit information. I do use Samsung Health because I've been with the Samsung ecosystem for a long time. So I have one of the original Samsung Dive accounts, and back before everybody else used to be able to find my phone, they had that as part of one of their secure services. So and I kind of feel between Knox and being a South Korean military provider, they probably do have security figured out to the point where whoever gets it, they need them to get that. So, that's my agreement with them. And I'm also on Google, much more than I think, but I believe there's some aspects with Canadian privacy that makes me feel more secure. I'm not sure how realistic that is. I think they have to have their servers in Canada at the moment because this is one of the NAFTA things. Mm-hmm. I'm still concerned about sending stuff through the US, though. But that's just me, says the person to people who don't have Internet of Things. So we're all paranoid one way or another.
Yeah. All right. Well, Keith is a security guy, so he'll probably have some interesting things to talk about on that level.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the whole thing. It's security is such a multifaceted thing, and there's lots of aspects, and there's privacy. But what does privacy mean? Are you talking about privacy from other people? Are you talking about privacy from governments, from all governments, from selected governments? There's security, there's convenience, there's a whole range of things that kind of tugging at each other, and quite frankly, it's impossible to, unless you disconnect yourself from everything, don't have a cell phone, don't have internet or anything. And even then, you've probably been tracked by CCTV. It's pretty much impossible to completely go off the grid these days. And I think it's reasonable to sort of look at who you're buying services or who you're providing data to and say, basically, do I trust them to do the right thing, and whatever the right thing is for you? And that right thing will vary depending on where you live in the world and what your political views are, and even what your job is. The one of the things that I was made aware of a while back is the generally, I work on the basis that I don't want any of my stuff to be publicly available. There's lots of things I don't want to be publicly available. I actually don't mind if Google has it, because I don't really have anything that Google can use other than, and I'm paying them for a service, which means they don't tend to use my stuff for advertising purposes. And in general, I kind of believe that if a government goes after me, then they'll have to go through Google first, and Google will at least make them get a warrant. However, I'm generally concerned, and the other aspect of it is that I've for many years, for probably about a decade and a half, run my own email server, and I'm pretty good at it, but it's a lot of effort. And frankly, even I'm with applying all the security patches and hardening the server and that, I honestly don't believe that I could completely block a government from, or even a good hacker from getting into my email server. So it's like, well, I'm risking it by running. I feel that by running my own email server, I'm actually risking more than if I gave it to someone like Gmail, who have probably got a lot more security in place than I could ever put in, from that kind of attack. So I choose to do that on the basis that I would rather have that layer of security in place. And okay, that means Google have got all my stuff, and it means potentially certain governments have got all my stuff. I don't think I could block those guys from getting, or certainly not the governments, from getting into my own privately run email server anyway. So, I don't see the benefit of running my own server and stressing about it.
I used to run my server on a co-location thing, on a virtual server and all that, but there's a lot of work, and I want to get into work, but let Michael have his say on this topic before we move on. I wanted to mention something about the time we're spending. Go ahead, Michael. Data was the question.
Data.
What are you feeding?
Well, in the near past, on the matter of mail servers, we use a hosted mail provider. We have our own domain. I honestly don't understand why more families don't have their own domains just generally, because we haven't changed our email addresses in 15 or 18 years after changing them because they were associated with ISPs, and that's, I don't trust ISPs, so at least I get to choose a mail provider. Not wanting to run my own server because I'm not that technical. That's a fairly involved thing. Certainly, we use the Amazon Echo, so we're sending voice snippets to Amazon periodically. We do have, we use a hosted phone system, which means we're sending our telephone streams to the net. There was a time when I had some concern about, well, VoIP in its most common form, that is SIP, is all unencrypted by default. And I thought, gee, somebody could record this. You just grab the RTP stream and away you go. It's very easy. Incidentally, we do have two smart TVs as it happens, but we have the smarts defeated because the TiVos take care of the smarts, and we have no interest in voice control of the TVs, which is the latest thing, I suppose. Anyhow, the part about recording the voice streams was, I kind of set that aside when somebody did some math and revealed to me that every single voice conversation in North America could be recorded, of course, with the help of the telcos, for a rather modest sum, and it was like $50 or $60 million a year, just because voice is so small an amount of traffic relative to all of the other things that we do over IP these days. And if that's the case, if it's $50 to $100 million a year to record every voice call all the time, and we all know how analytics have come along. It's like, well, you just have to presume that if you're on the telephone, it's being recorded and it's being at least analyzed automatically, if not by a human. Which is why we like things like Wire sometimes.
Didn't the NSA a year or two ago build a center in Utah or someplace that was going to be the data center where they record all the metadata of every single call in North America and probably everywhere else too?
Well, but that was the thing, and the amount of money they were budgeted to spend on that, it was way over $1 billion, and it dwarfed the amount of the analysis I saw was costed using Amazon Web Services, right? It's just using AWS and EC2 for storage. So if you're just using commercially available compute and storage resources, and you can do it for something on the order of $100 million, and they just built $1 billion data center, you know that they have significant capability. And there you go. And you know, that's not even a black ops operation. That's an on the books operation. Now, getting into that data center is a hairy and complicated thing, and I, being a Canadian citizen, would never be allowed. But yeah, and we do have Canadian customers, to your point, Cass. The company that I work for, ZipDX, we do have Canadian customers, and even some Canadian NGO and governmental folks. And as larger RFPs come out and more formal relationships are forged, they do ask for, you know, can you do servers that are in Canadian data centers? And we're happy to do that. So
I guess it's fairly trivial now to accept in, how can I put this? I guess in most of the first world, you can run servers in most of the countries, and people like Google, Amazon, and so on, they do have data centers everywhere, do they not? So I know that Google, if I ping Google, it's like 13 milliseconds or something. So there's no way that's going across the Atlantic. They have something here, although
that's their content distribution network that you're going to be hitting, though.
Yeah,
they'll have a CDN which will work out where they think you are, and then point you at the nearest server. And that may not actually be the server when you're pinging a DNS server. You may not actually be pinging the DNS server. You may actually be pinging a CDN proxy.
No, for sure, I get. But at
you're pinging an edge presence.
Yeah.
In our case, we don't use those kinds of services for the communication side of our business. We had in fact partnered up with somebody who had a data center in Montreal, and because we like physical hardware.
No, but physical hardware as opposed to
what other kind of hardware?
Well, so much, you know, a server. Is it a real server? Is it a virtual server? If it's a virtual server, then this goes back to a conversation we had. It was a debate that we had with Dave Michaels, a telecom pundit, 7 or 8 years ago, and that was hosted versus on-premise. And you start to parse it, and is it real hardware or is it virtual hardware? And there are the differences and subtleties, and geeks get very passionate about it.
Especially nowadays, that the recent revelations about the Intel microprocessors and the fact that there's actually embedded microprocessors which are internet connected that can basically override the main processor even when the main processor's off, and even upload new software to your system in theory. Even with physical servers, if it's directly connected, if it's connected to the internet in some form, then there's actually a kind of another layer of control outside of what you and I see that potentially can be used for all kinds of nefarious activities.
I think I heard something about on, say, Security Now podcast or something about a hack to turn that off. But anyway, that's, you know, if you turn that off, it's like turning your phone off and then it's not really off. We don't know, and I guess it's too detailed. But I wanted to touch on something, bounce off something. I had planned to talk about this anyway, but almost every one of you has mentioned this, and I'm a little concerned about the time that I'm spending. You know, here I am. I can do whatever I want all day. I don't have a job, so to speak.
Me too, as of June.
Really? Well, you'll see that there's no lack of things to fill hours. And one of the things that unfortunately takes way too much time is maintaining all this stuff, okay? And as I mentioned, I think in other conversations, when I first got my LG watch, which was I won it in a contest. Of course, at that time, I was like, no way I'm going to spend $200 on a watch. Get out of here. Smartwatch. It's ridiculous. And that thing was square, and people were asking me if it was an Apple Watch and so on. Anyway, they were rare then. But I did get kind of addicted to a couple of the functions, and I like it a lot. And but with the LG, had a lot of problems. And when you have to reboot, the concept of rebooting your watch, that takes time, and it means that you've got to watch it to reset it up if it needs other setups. Well, the LG was one thing. The Samsung in its early firmware was, you've had to reboot the watch. If that didn't work, you had to reboot the phone. Well, we all know Android's a wonderful thing, but it ain't, SSD Mac OS. It takes a while to boot. And you could spend easily 30 to 60 minutes messing around just to get your watch working again. Or something with our phones. I mean, how much trouble does anybody have with your phones? They all have issues, even Apple's, right? So something that I'd like to hear about, if you've got any horror stories. All I know is that globally, especially if you're the one doing the entire family, there's only 2 of us, but there's very few days that go by where my wife doesn't have some kind of a problem with the printer, the this, the that, and the printer's not really connected to the internet, but it could be. Anyway, back to Andy. Maintenance of all these devices and all of these smart this and that. Spending much time?
I suppose I do in a way, yeah. And if I had more connected devices, yes, it would become something of an onerous task if it didn't all happen automatically. And I'm not certain that security updates generally ought to happen automatically. It's one of those things where if something is a critical security bug, and they want to patch everything immediately, then fine. I can see the requirement for an automatic patching, but in general, I'd rather know what's being patched and why. It may make absolutely no difference at all. I'm not going to say I'm not going to patch that because I like being open to this particular form of attack. So I'm probably going to patch it anyway, but I still like to know before it actually happens. And I guess it's the control freaky side.
I think you should know. I think you want to know. And frankly, when Firefox changed its entire paradigm recently, if you update it, extensions don't work, a lot of them. And if there's anything you wanted to, that you depended on or wanted to use, such as downloading YouTube, forget it. Then there were, you can search the internet. There's a few workarounds. Perfect example. Speaking of wasting time, I love this. This is another one of my little, very short rant. So you're looking up a problem on the internet. Isn't the internet great? So, how do I reboot? How do I factory reset the IP675, for example? So you look it up, and somehow there's always someone out there on the planet that made a 15-minute YouTube on some question with low audio, noisy, low audio, unfocused. It's the worst thing in the world. And this, God love them, I guess, because, they went to the trouble of trying to help somebody. But give me a page that gives the answer in a sentence anytime over the YouTube. So we were talking about, Cass, you spend much time, and are you the one in the household? You seem to be the big, the bigger geek, no, of the two.
Oh, yeah, I am. I'm the help desk for our house. Happily, my dad has remained, I think, he might be on Windows 7. Pretty sure he's not on Windows ME. But as soon as he went off the same operating system as me, it was like, yeah, Dad, I can't help you. So, and yeah, I actually, you mentioned rebooting your phone, rebooting your watch. Like, I find that I have, like, I'm on a Samsung tablet right now. I have an S8. I've this year, in preparation for retiring, I've updated all of my tech, and it really does make a difference. Like, my previous watch was a S2 Classic. It didn't really take a long time to reboot, but this one is faster. And same with my phone. It's fast to reboot. Like seriously, I would say a 15-second reboot. Even the updates just don't take that long. The worst thing that ever happened to me was I was messing around with my phone and plugging it and unplugging it, and I ended up having to do a factory reset while I was on hotel Wi-Fi, and I didn't know exactly how that was going to work. And we were leaving the country in the morning, so I kind of wanted to have my phone, and even that, sure, it took a sleepless night, but when I left the next morning, I had all my stuff back. And I think that's one of the nice things about Samsung is they do those backup services. So, and other than that, I've been really, really happy with, like, we have a Google Home, Google Wi-Fi, so I don't do a lot with that. I just trust Google to do its updates. I was really pleasantly surprised by how easy it was to do the Chromecast that we updated and the Home Mini. It really was a matter of plug and go. And even the Alexa, once I downloaded the software. So I think that a lot of this stuff is becoming way more consumer friendly. But the security guy, whose name, I'm sorry, I'm really bad with names and we don't have the little things, who said that there's all these different layers of security. And I think, unfortunately, with this consumer stuff, what happens is people think they know what security they're invoking, but they don't really. And I think that's sort of the next level of information that has to get out to the consumer so that they do have a fair chance of not, like the only thing I do really is I don't go on Facebook and I don't go on Instagram, and I've disabled I don't use my Gear VR because it requires Facebook. So that's really the only security I've done. Sorry if that was a long answer.
No, that's fine. I have another question for Keith. Keith Milner is the guy we refer to as the security guy, I guess.
Oh,
we're kind of all into that. But Keith, a question that is actually off topic, but bouncing off the list. You posted or you put in the chat a long list of stuff, Chromecast and many other Sonos devices and so on. And you mentioned you have them on. Are they on I don't even know what you call this, but there's like a separate LAN kind of thing.
Yeah.
What is the thing that you're doing to make sure that those things that your neighbor isn't changing the tune on your Sonos or whatever?
I mean, bear in mind, I should point out my day-to-day job isn't 100% security. I work in telecoms, a bit like Andy, but I kind of, because I'm operational, security is often a very, very key part of what I do. So, for my own sake, I've actually got I've got a number of devices which I kind of listed in the chat on the Hangout, which includes Chromecasts and PS3s and various other bits and pieces. In general, any of the smartphones, including my own smartphone, anything which I don't really understand or I don't feel comfortable with the security of, I've put onto a separate LAN in my house, and that's kind of my household stuff, on the basis that at the end of the day, if something on that breaks, then I'm probably not that bothered because I can recover it. And then because I work from home and I've got a lab network and I've got my own network with kind of data and stuff like that on it, all of that stuff I have on a separate network to keep, to keep all of that secure, and so that I know that I'm not going to have some kind of smart thermostat suddenly just get owned and start hacking into the rest of my network. Now, at the end of the day, the trouble is this stuff is very, very difficult these days to control, because back in the past, an IP device would have a particular IP address, which is fine, which you've given it from when you put it on the network, and it's got it from DHCP, and a particular port. And that was it. And it's basically, if you wanted to control it from outside, you had to configure your firewall to put a pinhole through to allow that port forward. But these days, everything phones home, and so everything's encrypted. Now, the encryption's great, but it means that you've got no idea what it's doing or who it's contacting or why. And so And because companies like Google, for example, and Amazon, and anybody who uses their cloud services uses CDNs, then you don't even know what IP addresses they are. You can't even say, well, okay, I'm going to allow those IP addresses, because you really don't know what Google's IP address ranges are going to be from month to month. So the problem's got really difficult now. So, I mean, I can't really turn around and say I've got some magic formula for securing a network against this stuff. I just basically choose, for IoT stuff, I choose suppliers who I trust to a degree, and I trust aren't going to be hacked and have someone take over control of my stuff.
Well,
I want to speak to that Wi-Fi thing for a moment. Like, we have a router that from our cable company that came with Wi-Fi, and I've disabled that Wi-Fi and now use the Google Home or Google Wi-Fi. And that's been interesting, because once I started using that, it must have an extra layer of security, because I had a Panasonic home security system that I could look at stuff from the internet with. And once I put the Google Home in, nope. It didn't matter whether I did port forwarding or whatever I did. Everything they said, and I still could not get through that. So frustrating, but maybe Google has better security because of, you know, its function than even the cable provider and telcos do.
well,
That was just a comment.
Yeah, no, that's a good comment. The cable modem or router or whatever, router that you would get. I mean, I have that too. I have one right behind me from Orange. Funny, because I mean, I understand this stuff well enough to deal with it, but I don't want to spend time on it. So I have, you know, people have told me, well, you should get a router, blah blah blah. I've done that. I've set it to bridge, not this one, but other situations where I have used just put the router in bridge, the ISP provided one, and used my own. I've even used an old PC. Keith will resonate to this. You know, use my own IP tables and all that. I understand what that is, but I also understand that I have no desire to spend time messing with that. So you added new stuff to the list. My God.
I did go with the Home because I could use it on, it was an Google Wi-Fi. Sorry, I keep calling it the wrong thing. But because it had an app, so I didn't have to keep plugging my laptop in. And, you know, I've changed my password, but if something goes wrong with the router, then you have to plug your laptop in and go to that IP address and all that stuff, because I disabled it from updating over the internet. And it was just a humongous hassle. Whereas doing one cable into the Google Wi-Fi just resolved that whole thing. So it wasn't lazy. It was a act of laziness for me.
Well, supposedly they're pretty good. I don't know much about it, but I don't feel the need right now. We're about 3/4 of an hour. That probably covers pretty much what we want to say and what people might want to share. I wanted to go around one last time and maybe get a one-liner or a couple of paragraphs on what you think would be something important that's going to happen to this area. And I will steal something that between Cass and Keith kind of comes to me, which is what we really need is not so much transparency from manufacturers, but just complete responsibility. So whatever the black box is that they sell you, you don't ever have to worry about the updates. Now, sorry, Andy, you can't, at this level, it's a low level and you can't be asked because this is firmware. So I don't believe, like Dave taught, I don't believe that they should prohibit you from disassembling it or from messing with it. By all means, if you know what you're doing, and also independent labs can look at it. So that's great. However, they should absolutely be updating. I guess with reverence to Andy, we could have a switch like Windows does that says, okay, don't do it, you know, when I'm in the middle of downloading all the porn.
Yeah, but then you get other problems with things like Windows. Like you say, I like to shut down my machines at night.
Yeah.
And so I shut it down at night, and you switch it on in the morning, and like the creators update this last couple of weeks. Like I haven't got a machine for half an hour in the morning.
Yeah. And the other thing is on one of my wife's laptop, which is a Asus, I believe. It says, there are 772 updates for Windows. It's Windows 8, I think. And then when you go to do it, it goes through this long, long process, and then it basically fails half the time. And this is one of the things that probably I waste the most time on in my weeks. So we let it go. And then I try to assess what the real critical stuff is, and I try to force that through. But half the time, it doesn't work. It'll say, you have updates, blah, blah, blah. And then you enable it, and it'll be slogging along, but it doesn't actually go. So anyway, Michael, I'm going to give you the last word immediately because you got to go. Want to say something?
Well, the only thing I would say is I very much, I encourage everybody, and I know it's a bit of pushing a rock up a hill, but I encourage everybody that I know to take ownership of their network, and that includes, my stepfather, my brother, to know what's going on, and in particular, if you're with the cable company, own your own cable modem and router. Don't rent from them in perpetuity, because that's just throwing money down a hole. Plus, if you own it, then, I will help you learn something about it, and you'll be able to actually take ownership of the circumstance. And because so many people that I know, like my immediate neighbor here, for example, is completely beholden to his ISP for everything. And as they add more and more things, they get less and less functional, and they have less and less reliability. And I especially think if you've got kids, because the kids these days are so tech savvy, that use the resources within your family to ensure that you have some ownership of your circumstance, and don't just rely upon the good nature of some giant corporate entity.
So in other words, teach your children well.
Well, that's another argument.
The 60s is back.
Yeah. I got to go. It's been fun, guys. Bye-bye.
All right. Take care, Michael. Thanks for joining. Keith, you want to bounce off any of those thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. The trouble is, not everybody has the inclination or the skill to do that, and the inclination is a huge part of it. I do think it's almost a conflicting thing, but I do think that Cass is right. We do need more simplicity from the people who are providing this kit, and if you are purchasing a device, then that should come with guaranteed security updates as a minimum for a period of time. But at the same time, just like Dave Tutt, I think we should have the ability to decide when and where those security updates are turned on. So most people will be quite happy for it to update in the background at night. But personally, I like to be in control of when those updates happen. But also the ability to explore, pull them apart and actually see how they're working. Because all kinds of security issues that haven't been public, but have been known by various nefarious parties, have been discovered by people who are basically reverse engineering these devices and finding out that IP cameras, for example, have suddenly all been taken over and are conducting massive DDoS attacks on the world's infrastructure. So, we need to balance it. We need to have more responsibility for the people like Google or their associates who are providing this stuff, but also require them to actually open it up at the same time.
It's a good point, Cass. I won't say you're in love with, but you're very happy with your Google Wi-Fi. And if it just worked with very little setup, you don't really know what they're doing. And recall that Google Maps was storing Wi-Fi access point names. I don't think that was a big deal, and it was supposedly by accident. But to both of your points, it's really weird that we have all this stuff. We don't really know what it's doing. I mean, some of us who even get the technology fairly well, like Keith or others, unless you really take the time, and who has that today? Yeah. You don't know. I mean, Keith, you'll hear me when I say, you'll feel me, as they say, when I say that you'd have to use Wireshark to sniff and see what's going on, and that's, hey, you can do it, but it takes a lot of time to analyze and see what's going on. And there's a zillion packets going back and forth. Even if it's not encrypted, a lot of security faults like passwords in the clear are discovered by people doing this. But I don't want to be the one to do it. Somebody else has to do that. But
yeah, I mean, I do that stuff every day almost. I'm always looking at SS7 or VoIP signaling traces and Wireshark trying to work stuff out. And as you say, that's not encrypted because that's within our network. But the most of this stuff these days, which is good, is encrypted. It's good that it's encrypted because, you know, I don't want my passwords for example, for Amazon going off to Sonos because I've had to configure my Sonos system with my Amazon password, or at least an Amazon password, in order to support Audible, for example. And so it's good that it's encrypted, but then as soon as it's encrypted, it means I can't see what's going on. I've got no idea what's happening.
Yeah, and that's another. Go ahead. I think Andy.
Yeah, I'm wondering whether we're almost looking at this the wrong way around. I mean, particularly for us a bit more tech savvy, it's really all about us controlling our network and allowing things onto it rather than going out and buying a device that happens to work on your network. It's you with a lot of these things, you're trusting that the manufacturer that you're buying from has done their homework properly, that whatever they're going to do to your network affects only them and nothing else on your network. And in many cases, it's just not true. So we're not really yet at the stage where, I mean, you tech savvy kids, fine. I mean, you say teach your kids. How are you going to teach your kids if you don't know? But the kids find out, they learn. And they do, but they jump to conclusions and they learn things by rote. They don't necessarily understand what's going on, all the implications of anything that's going on. And why should they? I mean, they're kids. Let them be kids.
All they need to really know is how to Google the answer to how to defeat the child filter on your router or whatever else is going on. I mean, that is basically the motivation for learning. But there is a nice tendency in that young people, kids actually, are interested in coding, and they're interested in playing around with coding and configuration. I mean, they are more intellectually curious. And that when I was a kid, there was no such thing. So that helps a little bit. I mean, I wasn't curious when I was in 8th grade. I'm sure Fortran existed, but it held no attraction to me. And who even heard about that stuff? And there was all these big tape reels moving in the background, and you know, nobody was interested in that. But now it's kind of sexy to program and code, and coding has been pushed on young people. So maybe the world will change thanks to the young. Who knows? Cass, do you have a last minute? Last word?
I have last words, yes. Change your admin password on your router and your Wi-Fi. I mean, it's great for me because I go to my family's and they have the same one that's printed on their tags, which is okay for their physical ones because someone has to break into your house and read the tag, and they're not that. But for Wi-Fi, seriously, change your password. It's so easy, and if you cannot figure that out, then you should not have a Wi-Fi router. That's the beginning and end of it. Well, come on. That's your basic security.
Yeah, okay, but my 93-year-old mother wouldn't manage to do that. But I do it for her. So
exactly. I didn't say, okay, so you, as in you, a owner, should arrange for that not to be on the default password, whether you get it through a family member or pay somebody. Like,
I think there's a good solution to that, Cass, in that, for example, the router that's behind me, provided by Orange, they have a really strong passwords, which are written on tags on the bottom of the router. Fine. But if somebody's looking at the router, they're in, you know. So that doesn't matter. And you do not have to change it, although, of course, many people do change it. I know I changed mine immediately to password 123, and it hasn't given me any trouble. No problem remembering. I have a tip. That I've used, and I can reveal it on passwords because nobody knows this information. You have to be a certain age to do this. Use a very early address that you lived at with the punctuation. So say your address was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Password Lane, whatever it is, with the punctuation, with the dots, something Avenue South, for example, whatever that is, or an old phone number. As long as these are so old that no one living right now knows them, that's actually a pretty good secure password. It's not going to be easily guessable. It's going to be fairly long, like 12 to 16 to 18 characters, and I do a lot of that. So I challenge you now to find the address I lived 62 years ago, and you'll be home free on my network. All right, thanks everybody. This was a lot of fun, and I hope it's worth watching and listening to. Take care.
Thanks for organizing.
Thank you.
All right. Ciao.
Ready.